All right, we are back with more NFL coverage and to get straight into the developments portion of this particular week. To start things out, going back to last week, the Saints would sign a lease extension for the Superdome through 2035. Obviously, this isn't the first team to be granted an extension of their rights to the property that they call home, or at least for their football team. The Bengals obviously were working on this throughout the entire offseason and managed to get this done as well. Potentially with them in this situation doubling the amount of time they have left on theirs. So the Saints are just the latest team to do so. I guess for them it does work. Will it see them get any winning football anytime soon? I mean, granted, they did get their first win last week, but I don't know if too much is going to happen unless they play their cards right from now until then to restore this team to some form of competence once again. They desperately need it, to say the least. Jets running back Braelon Allen is going to miss the next 8 to 12 weeks with a knee injury. Highly unfortunate. I mean, Allen last season, despite him, being the complementary piece per se to Breece Hall, he honestly emerged as a good number 2 back for him last year. And it did feel as though he was going to take a bit of a better step this season, but his production has definitely taken a dive, and it doesn't help that he's going to miss that kind of time either. He hadn't scored a touchdown yet this season, hadn't even topped 100 yards on the year yet. So he's definitely been just getting his attention, I guess, in the offense diminished. I would suppose for Isaiah Davis. That's highly unfortunate. And again, you really hate to see it. Like, as a team, they've been running exceptionally well. So I have no doubt that when Braelon Allen has been healthy, even with that in mind, he'd be able to get it together at some point. But before, you can even make that stride, he's going to have a huge chunk of his season taken away from him. So that's highly unfortunate. At least, though, it is not necessarily season ending. Per se. Hopefully he can take all the time he needs to, maximize those recovery efforts and be able to come back stronger than beforehand. Maybe even get ahead of the curve and return to the team to get some games in before the end of the season. I mean, if it's, that kind of range, he might not end up missing the full 12-week slate here. Best case scenario, though. For sure. Arthur Jones, former Ravens defensive tackle, last Friday would unfortunately pass away at the age of 39. And, they kind of talked about it a little bit on subsequent broadcasts of NFL games at that point, speaking about how multiple Ravens teammates at this time, because he was a part of the team that won the entire thing in 2012, a lot of those same guys had nothing but positive things to say about him in this time, speaking to his attribute as a great presence in the locker room. And that's just a solid player throughout his tenure there. I mean, his production does say exactly that. And the fact that they have those sentiments in mind even all these years later after playing with him, more than 8 or so years to the point of which he retired from the game. That does speak tremendous volumes about him. I'm still not all too sure how it ended up happening. And it's again, just highly unfortunate stuff. I know his family is feeling that at this point still. And it's crazy because it's I didn't even know this at the time, but they kept on saying that he was related to both Chandler Jones, that's his brother, and he was also related to John Jones of the UFC. Now, former fighter there, at least since he did retire earlier in the year as well. So I couldn't even imagine what they are still feeling at this moment even with, less than a week having passed from that. Yeah, man, it's just, that's not something you ever want to, see. Especially at that young of an age, too. 39, again, even in a day where the sense of time for some of these people are just completely warped, and you're automatically old once you turn 30. You're automatically called all this different stuff. That is still a very ripe age for a general person. And he definitely had a lot more in store for all of those around him. A lot more to offer beyond just being a former football player. I'm sure he was on the path to that. He might have already been settled into that at that point. And yet, just like that, he is no longer on this earth. It's craziness, man. Crazy stuff. Moving on to a different injury. Joe Alt would be out with an ankle injury. And I can say that definitely did hurt the Chargers, after watching this game at this point. That certainly hurt them. That was going to be your blindside blocker because obviously Rashawn Slater was supposed to be filling that role. He's out for the season. You were already on your sort of last resort here. And then that happens to Joe Alt leading up to the game. So then they had to put in just a clearly inferior assignment at the left tackle position. I wasn't even too sure of who this player was. And the Commanders' defense at least, once they got settled into the game, they did a great job of attacking him specifically. He was just so discombobulated. He did not know what he was doing at all. And again, I can't necessarily blame that all on him. It comes with such short notice. That Alt suffers this injury. And, you're practicing behind the scenes, but let's face it, with you kind of being buried behind all of these other quality linemen, you're not going to see the field as much compared to these guys. Even if you might have an idea of the playbook and an idea of specific assignments, putting in an execution for the very first time in a game of that kind is going to be quite the struggle. I'm not surprised at that whatsoever. Alright. For a couple more injuries, Kyle Hamilton would still be out of that game with a groin injury. And then Eric Stokes Jr. in the Raiders-Colts matchup would also be out with a knee injury. But speaking of that Raiders-Colts matchup, as bad as the product was on the field, there would be quite the shocking situation to develop before the game even took place, rather. As I was watching college football on Saturday, got all the fucking channels going and all the action going on. And then it didn't really come in as breaking news, but I was peeping some of the tickers on the channels, and they started mentioning that Mark Sanchez, the former NFL quarterback and current analyst at the time for Fox Sports, was in the hospital, or at least that was the main text. So I'm like, really? Okay, so what happened? And then I had to wait for the ticker to come back around a little bit because I missed it. But I'm like, did I just see what I thought I just saw? I don't know. I had to wait a few minutes, and then it came back around, and, the text under it essentially said that Sanchez had been stabbed in Indianapolis following an incident. And I was like, whoa. Naturally, I'm not going to do a lot of overreacting in a situation like that. But anytime you just see that, while I'm, again, literally in the middle of watching a different level of football at this point, getting immersed in that action, that's something that's certainly going to grab your attention. So I'm like, in the moment, I'm just thinking, man, that's a horrible situation. Honestly, definitely unfortunate stuff. And again, I literally said, word for word, this is quite the sudden case. It was very sudden. Like, to go from one aspect of the game to then hear something about that happening to a former player, man, a lot of mental gymnastics can go into trying to discern what exactly is happening there. And you got this funny feeling when you're just hearing about that alone, that Mark Sanchez was stabbed. The common thing for people to do would be to jump to conclusions, and honestly, some people did. People in Indianapolis, in fact, I watched a different video on the entire matter, and they said that a couple of politicians in the city were just tweeting out about this, assuming that Mark Sanchez was still the victim at that particular point. And again, to be honest with you, with that aspect of it being thrown out initially, well, it's not hard to see why people would assume that Mark Sanchez would come out of the situation being a victim potentially in the wrong place at the wrong time, or potentially being in a situation where he just crossed paths with somebody who certainly did not have his best interests at heart and wanted to cause him harm. It'd be natural to jump to that conclusion without all of the full context in play. And again, either way, like I said, like anytime you see anybody in that kind of situation, you're going to feel a bit of you're going to treat them that way. You're going to want to see if they're okay. You're going to want to see how exactly all of this panned out. But again, your first instinct would be to check up on them and see how exactly they're doing. And a lot of that was going around in the early portion of this case. But while the situation would still be unfortunate, it is safe to say that with all of the information that came out literally within 24 hours later and in all of the days to follow this specific incident, script flipped real fucking fast. Not only did Mark Sanchez look less and less like a victim in this case, even though, again, anytime you have somebody getting stabbed, it's just like, you don't ever want to see that. But you could take that status of him, being potentially oblivious to having it happen to him, and having this happen unexpectedly. Again, just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not only was that narrative, that story shattered completely, but on the opposite hand, it made it seem, and it strongly looks like Mark Sanchez in this situation might have been the instigator in this entire ordeal. So we got to work all the way back. Yes, he was stabbed, but that was not the full story here. So according to this NBC article from Mike Florio here detailing the events of the situation leading up to it on the very Sunday following the entire ordeal, there'd be an entire section that kind of goes into all of the behind the scenes details around it. So I'll get into part of this section right here to cap off the first half of the information. Okay, so as this portion of the quote says, the altercation began via the story posted by Michaela Springer of WishTV.com when Sanchez told the driver that he couldn't stop his truck where it was parked. Sanchez added that he had spoken to the manager of the hotel. The victim said he would call his own manager to figure out what was happening. Sanchez then climbed up into the cab of the truck. He leaned over the driver's seat and he looked in toward the middle area between the seats. The victim told Sanchez he wasn't allowed inside the truck. Sanchez, who per the victim smelled of alcohol and slurred his words, kept repeating that he had spoken to a manager and they did not want the victim in this case to replace the fryer oil. End quote. I should note as well that a lot of the other articles here, since it came out in, again, just a few hours following this, the identity of the co-victim, you could argue in this situation, was sealed. He was definitely kind of concealed in that, yeah. He was not identified in this case yet. That's how bad it was. But again, just think about this for a second. Go back to that last part of this. Smelled of alcohol and slurred his words. Now again, these could be allegations in this case. But granted, Sanchez, by the end of this entire altercation, was found to be at a bar in Indianapolis. So one could imagine that if he was slurring his words, if he was functioning far differently than an average person would be and reeked of alcohol, you can imagine what the hell he was doing at a bar. He was probably getting drunk out of his fucking mind. And I mean, granted, you're going to do what you please in that situation. But again, who am I, again, as a person that doesn't even get myself into those kinds of things? There's nothing I can say about this, although I would say that I'm strongly against doing it and wouldn't myself. Again, if you are going to indulge in that, well, you have to do it responsibly. And even then, even if Sanchez doesn't get into this kind of situation right here, Sanchez was supposed to be working the Colts-Raiders game. And obviously, with him being in weaker physical condition at this point as a result of this, he wouldn't end up doing his job there. But again, put this aside for a second. Even though it will be very difficult to in just a little bit, would he have even been in the right mindset to do it when you're getting flat out drunk like that? Can I sit here and assume that something's going on behind the scenes in Mark Sanchez's life at this point that drove him to start acting in a way where he, again, felt the need to consume that much alcohol in that period of time? I can't. I have no way of understanding that at all. Only he truly knew what he might have been dealing with at the time. And that's the thing as well. I'm definitely going to be critical of Mark Sanchez in this, because what he would end up allegedly doing is far from redeemable in most cases. But again, everybody is going through something, no matter what. So that is just something that I would say you can't rule out here. Even though, again, you can't make an excuse for, again, what he allegedly did. But to look at, some of the aspects of the other parts of this half of the quote here. All right. A parking spot is how this all started. A parking spot, because you felt as though this person was in your way, when really, when you have Sanchez talking about this person potentially replacing the fryer oil, who knows whether or not this manager in question at this hotel wanted it or not. How would you know? How would you even be in the right headspace to kind of relay that information? They might not really trust you in that situation. as inebriated as you are. But even if he might have been taking his parking space, let's assume that that was the case. Well, it looks like he's just trying to do his job. If he's a truck driver delivering different goods to different spots in the big city of Indianapolis, this hotel being one such stop. You know, all the different facilities that a hotel offers, well, naturally, things are going to have to be moved in there consistently and cycled out. I can imagine that was what this truck driver in question was doing here. And I guess this victim, like I said, he was not buying it at all. So, hey, he had a manager of his own who was trying to figure out the matter in question as well. But Sanchez, no matter what, this is the first problem here in this entire thing. Why did Sanchez feel the need to allegedly get in his property? Because I would assume that with you being a truck driver, this is probably a commercial truck, I would assume, not in that line of work. You have a license for said truck. You own that. That is fully yours at that point. And I guess, again, at different moments, you could grant access to another person coming into the truck if they so choose. But in this situation, you're on the job. You're not going to let another person enter your property. And yet Sanchez, for whatever reason, decided to let himself in. Why the fuck is that? And then leaning over the seat and looking in toward the middle area. What the hell could he possibly be looking for in that situation? I couldn't even tell you. I don't know. And then, this, again, as silly as, fighting over a parking spot might seem, again, once he entered the damn truck, you could argue that it escalated right then and there. And then it got way, way, way worse. Because to get into the second half of this quote, security footage shows that Sanchez followed the victim as he walked around the truck and attempted to get the attention of a hotel security guard. Sanchez then blocked the victim's effort to get inside the truck. The surveillance footage shows Sanchez shoving the victim backward. From the quotes in the article published by the Star, Sanchez was seen throwing the victim against the wall and then to the ground. At one point, the victim sprayed Sanchez in the face with pepper spray. From the affidavit, the pepper spray appeared to have an effect on Mr. Sanchez for a moment, but he wiped his face and again advanced toward the victim. The victim then became fearful that Sanchez would kill him. He reached for his knife and stabbed Sanchez 2 or 3 times in the chest. Sanchez reacted with a look of shock and left the scene. End quote. Yeah. You heard that right. Again, let's just go step by step here. That is the definition of assault. To push him into the wall, or throw him into the wall, and then push him into the ground. Keep in mind that Sanchez is 38 years old at this time, and this man is a 69-year-old. Again, probably just an everyday guy trying to make ends meet, trying to handle his business and do his job. In reality, again, outside of potentially infringing on his parking space, I don't know how Sanchez could possibly feel like this guy wronged him in any way. And again, yes, he was probably far, far out of his headspace in this situation. But you still had some knowledge of what you were doing here. This man, and I think I'm going to reiterate this multiple times, this man is probably old enough to be his father. I don't care whether or not they're fucking related at all, because they definitely aren't. But just think about this shit for a second. This man is old enough to be your fucking father, and you're out here doing this to somebody you don't know just because of a parking space. Who are you to get in the way of him doing his work? And again, it's his property. You're going to block him from getting into a truck that he owns, that he has a commercial license for, and that he uses to conduct his line of business. As I would suppose it being a mover of goods. That is not your place at all. Yet you feel that big, bold, and brash that you want to start and pick this fight with an elderly man. Where is the respect for your elder in that situation? Seriously. You have no business physically harming him like this. Especially when, again, nothing of this sort even had to go down over a parking space and a simple miscommunication. So I can't blame this man in question for utilizing pepper spray. I can't blame him for trying to use some form of a defense mechanism. And again, it looked like it was going to work for a second. Maybe Mark Sanchez, for just a slight period of time, you would think, would actually recognize what the hell he was doing to this man. And yet, he kept advancing forward. Must have been some strong fucking alcohol. Combined with a person in Sanchez who, at this point, again, over something so small, was probably getting incredibly fucking outraged. And all of that pent-up anger just led to him continuously moving forward. Again, not in the sense of rushing at him, but you're still trying to walk forward towards him to try to cause him even further harm, as if what you already did wasn't crossing a major fucking line. So at that point, as a last resort, I guess this person felt like he needed to go to an extra measure here. Because as this New York Times article from Kavi and Ziegler gets a quote from the man in question in that moment, he essentially said that, quote, "This guy is trying to kill me," the driver thinking recall, according to the police. End quote. And again, it's probably not just the idea of Sanchez walking towards him. You can imagine what his facial expression would look like in this situation. He probably had his fists balled up, veins popping out of his chest, his arms, something, anything, to just give off such a menacing look to this individual that he felt as though right then and right there, his life was going to end at the hands of Sanchez. And that's not something that any person should really have to go through. And again, in this case, you're dealing with a man just trying to make an honest living, who was definitely not bothering Sanchez at all with what he was doing, and yet he finds himself in this case. It's completely horrible. You know, now, Sanchez, to have to endure, those kinds of injuries in the chest area, as tough as that is, again, you barged your way into this person's property. You kept him, prevented him from being able to re-enter it, and you were the first person to make physical contact with the other, physically putting him in harm. Even if I don't make much of Mark Sanchez as an NFL player, you would certainly be in much better condition even at this stage of your post-playing career compared to a 69-year-old man who, again, at this point, with that old age, probably has a slower metabolism. And once you sustain an injury like that at that kind of age, you're not going to be able to recover as quickly as a 38-year-old would. And you did that to him first. At that point, the man is fearing for his life. This is clearly self-defense at this point. He's going to do whatever he can to get out of that situation. Now, as Sanchez would reiterate at multiple points and as multiple articles state, in that moment, he blacked out. And they say he left the scene here, but again, a lot happened in between then and before the police actually ended up getting on the scene, I guess, getting him in the hospital and then arresting him. Because, man, a few days later, on Monday, they would tell, the public about the injuries that the co-victim suffered, and they would actually put his name out. I came across this article a little earlier, and, the image, I've also seen it beforehand. Man, it is absolutely horrible. So that couldn't have been all of it. At least, I guess the Pro Football Talk article here did a decent enough job of stringing some of the events in the timeline together. But again, if Sanchez at that point just left the scene, okay, I don't know how possible that would truly be. Because they would come out with this image, and obviously, I'm not going to show this fucking image on this video. You have to go out and you have to search it up for yourself. That shit, and I'm not even in a situation, it's not even worth it to me. But if I was someone who really cared about getting monetized at this point, this image would not end up anywhere near this video. And even that aside, the most important thing is that it is just a horrible sight to look at. To see an elder in that state, a 69-year-old man, in that condition. As this quote says right here, they blur his, eyes out to, not give away his full face. Again, as it states, you can see from the pictures that he's got an enormous wound cut on his face that impacted his jaw, mouth, and tongue, said Eric May, an attorney for Toll. The scarring that he has and is going to have, it affects his speech right now. Obviously, he's in a lot of pain. There's a lot of swelling, May said, explaining that is one of the reasons why Toll is not giving his interviews. Mentally, what he and his wife are going through has been considerable, May said. He's really just shaken up. Toll's son is getting married next week, and he's not going to be able to attend the wedding, so he's sad about that. Victim attorney Eddie Reichert added. End quote. like a laceration, a huge slash in like this area of his fucking face. It'd probably be on this side because obviously this is a front-facing photograph. So it's probably going to be over here. A full deep cut on this side that got so deep into this portion of the flesh that it touched his tongue and affected that area. So again, this had to go much deeper than Sanchez, again, just being stabbed. You know, there are a number of different ways to look at this. Apparently, they said something about Sanchez grabbing a window. Maybe he was trying to fight back in what could have been a potential struggle at that point. And maybe as he tried to stave off getting stabbed again, potentially, he might have gotten a cut on Toll. Perry Toll, in this situation, is the name of the co-victim here. Yeah, it is, man, oh my goodness. It is just not a, like, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if people just threw up. It's absolutely tough to see. And again, like it says, man, yo, this is a 69-year-old man we're talking about. Again, all he's trying to do is get through his day and do what he's got to do. He's literally about to celebrate a new inclusion to the family when you talk about his son getting married and he's not even going to be there. This man's child is not even going to be able to have him walk down the aisle beside him. And all because of Mark Sanchez. Whether you believe that he's a co-victim or, again, as this states right here, honestly, like he instigated the entire thing, if all these things are true, took that opportunity away from an innocent man over a fucking parking spot. And again, like I said, I know that, again, there is a chance that, again, Sanchez, in terms of just going out and drinking like that, maybe there was something going on behind the scenes. You can never truly know what's going on with a person when you look at it from the surface level, all right? You just can't. But that is no fucking excuse for you to do that kind of physical damage to somebody who, again, is old enough to be your father. Just think about this from, the standpoint of somebody looking outside in on this situation. Think if this kind of thing would have happened to, like, a parent in Mark Sanchez's, lineage. Right? We'd probably be saying the same thing there if a different person attacked one of them after a situation in which they're just minding their own business. They didn't do anything to provoke the individual at all to go to those extreme lengths to cause them harm. We'd be saying the exact same thing in this situation. So why the hell did Mark Sanchez think it was okay to do this to this man, bro? That's not fucking cool. It's not. And again, yes, there's going to be a bit more of an emphasis on it because of his status as a former player. But again, in reality, like, you see this generally speaking. Like, it's like, I don't know, man. Like, you're dealing with innocent people here, and you're just gonna leave them in situations that, again, they definitely did not ask for. To have younger and stronger people in way better condition do those kinds of horrible things and violent things to them. It's a damn shame, man. And, obviously you would hope that Sanchez and this man and Perry Toll both recover. But it is a truly damning situation, to say the least. And Sanchez should very much feel shame. Should feel regret for taking things to that level. As this quote from this CBS Sports article states, certainly the thing that stands out to us is that this is a situation that did not need to occur, Mir said. We're literally talking about people fighting over a parking space or a dispute about where people were parking, and it resulted in a person with incredibly significant injuries, end quote. Now let's just put it like this. You have to definitely get behind what the city is doing to handle it. For one, I will say that those same politicians that came out and were, I guess, on the side of supporting Mark Sanchez as a potential victim in this case, they took their tweets down. And I guess other people in this time were kind of calling them out for, at least in one of the cases, for the person using that moment to capitalize and make it, I guess, a selling point for their campaign. And it's like, okay, that's kind of fucking cheap. And honestly, in any other case, you probably still would have convinced a few people to give you a few looks or something. But again, that is why it is important to look at the situation in totality. And I mean, a lot of the other broadcasts kind of fell victim to it as well. Like Fox Sports themselves, made it all about Mark Sanchez in this case. And granted, when you have a quick segment looking at something like that, you might not want to get into all of the details. But, man, it would not age well as more and more information came out. That's all I gotta say about that. And, like I said, the city is not playing any fucking games with him whatsoever. I'm gonna get into this whole quote and string it together. But essentially, they don't give a fuck who he is, or what he did, or what he's doing right now. They will lay down the law if they see that all this evidence lines up, that all this evidence is confirmed and correct. They will lay down justice on this man. Truly. To string it all together, as this article states, former NFL quarterback and USC star Mark Sanchez faces an upgraded level 5 felony battery charge stemming from a weekend incident in Indianapolis, Marion County prosecutor Ryan Mears said during a Monday press conference. Sanchez, briefly hospitalized with injuries from a stabbing, was initially arrested for battery with injury, unlawful entry of a motor vehicle, and public intoxication. If found guilty, Sanchez could face between 1 and 6 years sentence in prison for the level 5 battery charge, which is a felony. Per one of the police chiefs there as well. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care where you live. If you come into our city and commit violence, we'll use all the tools at our disposal to hold you accountable. End quote. And that's how it should be. Now again, should this be happening generally? Absolutely not. There's just no place for that kind of thing. Like, seriously. But you'd think with Sanchez being a celebrity, and there have been many cases in potentially worse situations and lower leverage situations where celebrities have gotten away with this sort of thing because of their status. And essentially, they're making it clear that that will not happen in this case. No amount of money is going to save Sanchez from facing punishment here. Prison time is not something that he might be anticipating, but man, you legitimately caused this man such physical harm. And I don't think they said anything about potential life-threatening injuries, but at that stage, they could very well be that way. These things could take a long time to heal from in that state, and he may never truly recover from those things. He still can't even speak right now, for crying out loud. So if it comes down to him serving prison time, well, that's what is going to happen here. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And again, I'm sure that this punishment would also come with like specific classes on, I guess, just the effects of drinking in general. Because again, this is yet another lesson in why, again, you drink responsibly to keep yourself in full function. And also just having general respect for people, not to do some shit like this over a fucking parking space. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that, man. Like, this did not need to go that far. It's truly unfortunate stuff. To add even more insult to literal injuries here, Perry Toll is honestly well within his right to do this. As this quote right here states, Toll has filed a civil suit against Sanchez and Fox, per a quote from this ABC 7 article here yesterday. And he is well within his right to pursue legal action. I don't think it's said about, for how much money, for when this case could see court. But honestly, those things are secondary right now. Money ain't gonna help. Yes, it'd be for damages and stuff like that, but again, we're talking about potentially irreversible damage to multiple organs in his body. He himself, again, has to potentially, if this is bad enough, he may have to go through sessions where he needs to relearn how to talk. He may never be able to talk the same way again. When it comes to consuming food, since you have that entire gap here or here, it might be difficult to consume food the same way ever again. Basic things that would, be a part of this man's life, he might not even be able to do anymore. And he's certainly in bad enough condition now to where he may have to take an extended amount of time off of work, which again, you don't really know much more about the man than what's being presented right now. He could be in any number of situations. I can't tell you whether he's well off or whether he is in a situation where he's struggling to make ends meet. I have no idea. I cannot speak on that at all. But goodness gracious, in that moment, he's clearly just trying to do his job, which is clearly supporting him in some way. And now he can't have that as a source of potential income anymore, or at least for the time being. And it again may take months, even years for him to get back in the physical shape to take that up again, leaving the door open for someone else to potentially swoop in and just never look back when it comes to their time as a potential truck driver here. All because of, again, this blind rage in, even with the way that some people have been speaking about Mark Sanchez since then, this damn super ego from Mark Sanchez. Because again, just because you are on this way, if we're going to look at it from that perspective, just because you're on your way to do work for a broadcast for a game that honestly didn't even end up being worth it, a game that wasn't on national television by any means, and just because you have the status of a former NFL quarterback still getting paid, I would believe, a six-figure salary with Fox Sports, you thought that you could do this and potentially get away with it? In a day and age where, again, thank goodness that the surveillance footage did come out. Once that shit hits the internet wave, that shit can spread like wildfire. And you seriously thought that you were going to be invincible from any amount of punishment, any type of, I guess, karma here? I don't, like, come on now. You fucked around and you found out real quick. There's just no way. So again, that's definitely a lot to look into. But again, like I said, it's just funny what happens when you look at both sides of a full and genuine story here. And it's just a good thing that people saw it so quickly. So where they couldn't continue to run with this blind narrative that Mark Sanchez was just a victim in the wrong place at the wrong time for way longer. Because we genuinely would never have known if they did not do the proper digging into the victim here in Perry Toll and look deeply at the full footage, at the full video that was caught on, I guess, CCTV camera and like other areas nearby. Again, it's real stuff, man. You have to do this stuff responsibly if you're going to do it. And especially in a public space. Man, you don't even need to be a celebrity to learn that lesson, man. Like, the last thing you want is to get yourself in a situation where you're acting out publicly with, again, already repressed things that you might have in your mind and just fueling that even more with all of these substances and alcohol. It's just not wise to overload yourself on that, ever. Now, if you're going to have a good time, have a good time. But again, even though this is a pretty, again, this went extremely left, this ended up being an extremely even darker situation than one would have anticipated before when you just saw that Mark Sanchez was in the hospital. Oh, how crazy that time might have been for some people to see that one day. And then within just a few days later, you get all this shit. Oh my gosh. It's genuinely not worth it to do that to yourself and also be a potential danger to other people in that moment. Again, extreme case right here. It's not impossible if you don't handle yourself correctly. And I mean, I definitely had to get the serious matter out of the way because, there were a lot of serious components about this. But I did hear something exceptionally crazy. I don't know where the fuck, I heard from somewhere, bro. This man, Mark Sanchez, before all this went down again, in the bar, getting drunk and loaded out of his mind. You want to tell me why this nigga was apparently doing wind sprints in the fucking bar? Why? And I guess somebody must have tried to stop him from doing them or something. And I guess he stepped out, which is then where he encountered this, I guess, parking space situation, confronted Toll about it, and all the rest happened. Again, I've already went through all that. But fucking wind sprints in a bar, bro. Again, I can't attest to everything that goes on in those kinds of spaces. But, from what I've seen through other media, you can look at TV, you can look at film, They're not exceptionally large spaces. In fact, different walking paths in there, from what I see on TV and film, tend to be narrow. So you mean to tell me that you have other people in this space at the time, I would imagine, because it's probably open for a good amount of time. Sanchez couldn't possibly have that kind of motion where they open it for him specifically later on, even after it's closed. It's definitely a fucking public place. So there are other people in there at this time, indulging in their own, choices of drink, doing their thing. And I guess you have other people potentially moving around, trying to get up, walk out, walk to other areas of the bar and stuff like that. And this man is just with the drunkest sort of focus imaginable. Yeah, drunken focus. Try that shit on for size. This man is trying to lock in and do wind sprints. He's probably stumbling all over the place. He's probably not even doing the shit in a straight line. Or he might be so fucking out of there that, again, he legitimately sees everything around him as a blur and is actually performing them at a way faster rate? I don't know. I don't know how he execute wind sprints there. But you know what the shit does remind me of? And again, this is a bit more leverage, but hey, they wanted to get on my QB for potentially doing this shit, so fuck it. Y'all remember that story that came out about Russell Wilson a few years back, where he was said to have been doing like high knees, jumping jacks, and like other exercises and stuff like that on the fucking team playing with the Broncos? And y'all gave him so much shit for doing that on the fucking plane. So again, while this took a completely left and dark, serious turn, for that aspect of it, man, like, yo, I know people would be flaming the fuck out of Mark Sanchez for that specifically, on top of the other stuff, if you so choose. Because there's no fucking way. Like, that is arguably, again, it's not even a competition. But at that point, especially with what it ended up leading to, I mean, for goodness sakes, man, like, even with Russ doing that, the plane landed safely, they got where they needed to be, everything was cool. Maybe the teammates just thought it was a little weird. That was the worst case outcome for that. And you compare that shit to putting multiple lives, including that of another person and your own, promptly, with you doing what you did to that other person in danger, being the worst case scenario here? Come the fuck on. Come on. Just give it up, bro. Alright, to move on to that and to a few other injuries here. Multiple Seahawks would be taken out of action in between, a little bit of time and for the entire game due to respective injuries. Derick Hall earlier in the game would be taken out completely with an oblique injury, and Tariq Woolen went out with a concussion at some point. They put Nehemiah Pritchett in, and honestly, it did not look the best. But again, there's not much you can do when your cornerback core is already depleted, and, at that point, Woolen is not going to have much of a choice but to come out once you enter concussion protocol. That's just the name of the game. Tying it back into the Raiders game, because we have even more to say about it, and this would be pretty fucking ironic. Now, Germaine Pratt has been in some shit over the past few years, and honestly, they mentioned in this thing that he didn't make the team trip to Indianapolis. Now, I don't know for what reason. Did he voluntarily stay back Was he hurt and decided not to go? I don't know what went into it, but either way, he was released from the Raiders earlier in the week. And I think you could take a wild guess as to who signed him. The fucking Colts did. So, in between the fact that, like, honestly, man, if this, you know what, yeah, man, this is still an NFL recap. This entire shit is a fucking melt session. All of it. Every last bit of this shit. You go from having the Mark Sanchez situation happen beforehand, which already just casts a bad light on the game at large, since he was supposed to be working this shit. Then you get into the game, and you blow out this fucking Raiders team to the point where they're not going to be able to live that shit down. And then the Colts managed to acquire a player who, again, prior to this entire thing going down, was with the fucking Raiders. Why are all three of these things tying in together? Why? Just absolute madness. And again, just think about how all of that shit lines up, man. Inexcusable stuff from Mark Sanchez. Just inexcusable, no matter how you slice it. Uncharacteristic loss for Pete Carroll. And then to put the icing on the fucking cake, this is the team that Germaine Pratt goes to. Like, in reality, it should be a decent move alongside Zaire Franklin, and with the Colts losing EJ Speed, to have a veteran like Germaine Pratt back there may not hurt at all. But at the end of the day, I think Germaine Pratt is mostly accustomed to playing middle linebacker, and Zaire Franklin already has that shit down pat. He is a tackling machine, one of the best linebackers in the NFL right now, in the middle. And it would mean that Pratt would have to adjust to playing on the outside, which I'm not all too sure that he's capable of doing this, to be honest. But we will see how it works, I guess. But yeah, it's a fucking melt session. Like, that game, when you look at all that happened before it and all that happened during it and after it, might legitimately be a cursed game. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you, man. Just, like, what the fuck? Oh, my gosh. All right. Moving on, man. Omarion Hampton will be placed on IR with an injury, and he's going to miss the next 4 games. So I guess they're going to elevate, for the Chargers, both Hassan Haskins and Kimani Vidal to, I guess, lead back and complementary back duties here. Again, with the limited amount of talent that you have on your roster at that position, because Najee Harris was already out before this, you got to utilize what you have. But hopefully Hampton can come back, in due time, recover right, recover efficiently. Honestly, leading up to the injury here, he'd been doing well enough. A little bit of a struggle out of the gates, but, that's typical for any rookie. They are counting on him to be a workhorse, and, he, again, will have to work through that, but it was looking well enough to start things out. He started coming on strong as of late, so it's unfortunate to see that progress will stall out for a little bit. The Bengals will get themselves in some interesting territory, man. The Bengals would execute a trade with the Browns, and you would absolutely not fucking believe who they would get back. They sent a fifth round pick to the Browns in exchange for Joe Flacco and a 6th rounder. there are multiple, well, honestly, there are really only two ways to look at this. Yeah, three. Okay. Jake Browning, man, oh man. Like I said, you can look back in the first part of this, the fact that this man, without really appearing in as many games, is tied for the league lead in interceptions. The Bengals as a team have been getting decimated since he's taken over as a starter. And I felt, that it was going to be a wrap for them this season. Maybe they're looking at this the same way as well. But at the same time, they know that, to continue dropping games like this is just not sustainable enough. If Joe Burrow does still realistically have a chance of coming back, they got to start turning the tide around now. And I guess they felt that a change needed to be made. So not only do they get Joe Flacco here, but they already named him the starter for the next game. Now, how much will it do for them? Some of the numbers will tell you that Joe Flacco has been a worse quarterback than Browning has. And I mean, this is a person in Joe Flacco that got benched for a rookie. Also, from that standpoint, why does Joe Flacco keep AFC North hopping? Why? In terms of division rivals of the Ravens. Why? From fucking 2 stints with the Browns, now you're about to be taking the field for the fucking Bengals? Oh, I think every single Ravens fan in existence would fall to their fucking knees and faint if this man was to ever become a Pittsburgh Steeler. Like, all of these AFC North rivalries are fucking chaos. They're gritty. They're tough. These teams absolutely hate each other. But at some point, if you're Joe Flacco, you gotta draw a line. You know that Baltimore and Pittsburgh rivalries get very fucking heated. There is no fucking shot that shit happens. If it does, yeah. I'd actually be out. There's no way that shit goes down. In 3, it might open a window for Shedeur Sanders to start. They're still rolling with Dillon Gabriel to this point because, again, he did not play bad in that game. He didn't. And as long as he keeps doing fine, they're probably going to continue to give him chances. But yeah, Shedeur Sanders, with the fact that they've already cycled through multiple quarterbacks and have moved them to other teams at this point, there's nothing certain. There's nothing certain about any quarterback right now in Cleveland. Even with Dillon Gabriel starting right now, a few weeks can make all the difference. All Shedeur Sanders has to keep doing, if he does want to give himself a chance, is just continue to put in the work behind the scenes. But yeah, again, if Gabriel keeps balling out, his chances of playing on a week-to-week basis will probably diminish. Again, just going to continue to see how that goes. The Ravens would sign C.J. Gardner-Johnson after the Texans cut him. So that would be a follow-up there. Now, he's on their practice squad, rather. I'm sure he'd be elevated in no time. They run a specific scheme where they'd love to have 3 safeties that can work interchangeably in the back end of the defense. And, obviously with a lot of their core guys out right now, it has definitely been tough for them all over the field. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, even though I guess there were reports stating that he was just being a bad teammate in Houston and just spewing all of this negative stuff, and they didn't want that kind of culture in their locker room. From that standpoint, that could be a problem for a Ravens team already going through the ringer right now. But if he does keep it football and he does execute on the field, again, he is still a pretty damn good safety. And you're not really paying him much at this point. He doesn't cost you really anything compared to some of the other players that you have right now. So you may as well give him a shot to help you fill this vacancy for the time being. I don't have a problem with that at all. But you also get a out of left field report from Odell Beckham Jr. here. Apparently he was suspended 6 games for violating the NFL's PED policy. I mean, like, Odell Beckham Jr. again hasn't really gotten a look from any team in free agency to this point as it is. And honestly, as sad as it is to say for a player in Odell Beckham Jr. who was once this burgeoning superstar caliber player in the early portion of his career in New York. And then for a little bit of time in Cleveland before all of that stuff went left field. As promising as it looked then, like, it's not been going well as of late. Aside from him getting a Super Bowl, again, he didn't even really play in the game all that much. Got himself injured there. And has not really been able to find a consistent role with any team for a good enough amount of time afterwards. Unfortunately. So again, if this stands, man, like, Odell Beckham Jr.'s career might legitimately be done as it is. And if he doesn't get that call, like, he could legitimately retire in the next couple years or so. But this, again, is just, like, crazy for you to be serving this. And he'll have no choice. But again, it's like no team is dealing with him anyways right now. So, how much does it really do? In all honesty, not much. The Titans would waive Treylon Burks. They only, like, recently reactivated him before the Cards game. And I guess as it just gets harder for them to find a role for him in this offense, I guess they just decided to move on from him. Again, it's unfortunate stuff, and I did think this was going to be a year where, hey, he would get a chance to prove himself at least. But I guess with the roster they already have, even though, again, they're still ass, they feel content with giving up on the Treylon Burks experiment. It did not go well at all, to say the least. And, I mean, you hope that Burks can, like, still get a chance elsewhere. But again, a lot of teams are in good wide receiver spots. Or it needs to have a very serviceable wide receiver that they favor over Treylon Burks right now. So I don't know about that. You'd have another trade as the Ravens would trade edge rusher Jayson Oweh and a 7th rounder to the Chargers in exchange for Alohi Gilman and a 5th rounder. Again, Gilman is a decent safety. I don't know if he necessarily moves the needle for you. And again, they did also get CJ Gardner-Johnson, who I would argue is better. But I guess maybe they just feel this need to stack up on guys, given just how many injuries have taken place. And if you look at it from that perspective, I can't blame them. But once you get these guys back, again, you'd have a bit of an overload here. So they're going to have to figure that out in time. I did not think that they would move on from Jayson Oweh, though. But again, the thing with Oweh has been the same as always. He has the speed to get the pressures, but this man legitimately cannot convert these into sacks. It is fucking crazy. Like, as I'm watching these games, I'm trying to see if he'll break free and get a sack. And it just doesn't happen. I mean, granted, last year when it came to getting sacks, the fact that he had 10 was pretty fucking wild. And even then, that was an anomaly for his career. It's not been going well for him this season. He's not a player that has consistently been a key starter in the defense, although that did change last year. He's only started officially 2 games this season. In 5, just has 10 tackles in a TFL. It's been bad for that defense in general, but they just got to figure it out entirely. Moving on from Odafe Oweh at that spot also forces them to put more trust in rookie Mike Green, and I don't know if that's the best case scenario right now. He can be a solid edge rusher, but it hasn't been there yet. And then again, they also will consistently throw that man out in coverage on like hook curls and stuff like that, and he does not know what the fuck he's doing in that regard. So it's like, why even bother putting him in that spot when you know he's not accustomed to doing this? Doesn't make any sense. The Cardinals would find head coach Jonathan Gannon. He gave Amari DeMercado a piece of his mind on the sideline. He hit him. He definitely hit him. I ain't gonna go as far as some people and say that he punched him, but he definitely gave him a good clean nudge as he was walking right past him. It was more so to his abdominal area, wasn't anywhere near his chest at all. But when you're a coach, just like there have been cases in college, for example, and even with what was going on with Urban Meyer and that Jags team in 2021, just like we would be against having head coaches just completely berate their players verbally with derogatory statements and stuff like that, you also can't put your hands on a player like that if you're a coach and vice versa. There's got to be a respect of physical space there. At least Jonathan Gannon owned it. But yeah, it's definitely not something that you can do. Even though can I fully blame him? DeMercado he cannot do that shit. He can't. It's just so backbreaking. And then I watched the shit in post again. Not only was this man literally putting the ball out in front and letting go of it before he reached the end zone, this man has the nerve to start celebrating, falls to his knees, and throws prayer hands up to signal a touchdown. No, you didn't get the fucking score. You were a fucking idiot. No, you didn't do that shit, man. It's unacceptable stuff. But again, DeMercado has also owned it as well. We'll see if he can actually make good on that. And you just, again, if you're a coach, I do get why Gannon would go and do that in this situation. But you can't do it. You can't do it. And then for the last development, there is yet another trade because the Jags would... oh my goodness. Well, their second to last development, rather. I guess since I'm already into it. But yeah, the Jags would trade Tyson Campbell and a 7th round pick yesterday to the Browns for Greg Newsome II and a 6th rounder. I'm not going to lie to you. Tyson Campbell being moved on from this, I can't understand because he'll have his good moments, but especially in that Chiefs game, man, that man got cooked so many fucking times, bro. Let me tell you. And you know what? As soon as they saw that, even with the Jags winning, they were like, okay, we've seen enough of Tyson Campbell at this point. We've drafted this man to be a lockdown corner. He is far from that. We got to cut our losses. Honestly, for the Jags to get Greg Newsome II back, it's pretty damn solid. He himself has his own problems with inconsistency, but I would argue that he's a much better and much more further along as a cornerback than Tyson Campbell is right now. You're not going to ask him to necessarily guard the other team's best wide receiver every single time, but he definitely will be able to put up a much better fight and not constantly get beat on every fucking route. Or be baited into penalty after penalty every single fucking time either. Like, the combo of Ward and Newsome II was definitely elite in Cleveland, even with all the bullshit going on. And I have no doubt that with Lewis in the slot and Greg Newsome II handling, I guess, wide receiver 2 duty on most occasions, like that could be pretty solid stuff. Because if it is the main guy, then you'll probably have a little bit of worries. But I'm sure that it rotate, in most situations. If you're the Browns, though, why not even bother getting Tyson Campbell back for this? Why accept the deal? Why? I mean, again, for years, Newsome II has been a solid cornerback for you, and you downgrade? Even with Tyson Campbell being a little younger at this point. I just don't really get the logic behind that, personally. But fine. Also, the Vikings-Browns game, as this article says right here, would actually become the most watched NFL Network London game ever. They had 6.4 million viewers on average, outpacing every other NFL Network London game. And I'm like, how? There have certainly been, well, you know what? Let me hold on for a second, because honestly, man, there have been some decent London games. There have been, but a lot of them have been extremely fucking chaotic and just like unexpected. I still can't get over the fact that the fucking Jaguars put belt the ass on Baltimore in London around a decade ago. I still can't get over that shit. That shit was surprising, to say the least. Or the fact that you had the Falcons go through that chaotic ass game with Desmond Ridder against the Jaguars in London as well. Like, you'd think that they'd be solid primetime ball games to watch, and no. So yeah, I just can't see why this would be the case, even if it did come down to the wire. I don't know. I find that incredibly weird. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.